This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, I just got back from my second business lunch in a year and a half of being, pandemicked and quarantined away. And it was with, a person who I know well, who I've known for years, who we know are both vaccinated. And so it was very, very comfortable and all. But we went into the restaurant and, we both wore our masks on the way in and sort of looked around and we're sort of joking with each other saying, do we need the mask? Do we not need the mask? We want to wear the mask. We do. And we wore it in to make sure that everybody else knew that we weren't being jerks. And I think it's really important at this point that we're at, I'm fully vaccinated. Like I said, whole family is, and she is as well. And I think it's really, really important that we go out of our way right now to reassure everyone around us that we are taking care of our own business, that we are making sure that that we're broadcasting to everyone else that we are being as safe as possible for our own sakes and for the sake of everybody else, regardless of what your political belief is about vaccinations or what you think the science is about vaccinations. And I'm a very scientific based guy. You need to be considerate of the people around you. I think that's my personal philosophy is where it boils down to is my rights end where yours begin. And you have the right to feel comfortable around me. So I need to go just a little bit out of my way to make sure that you're comfortable. So we wore our masks into the restaurant. And as soon as we sat down, we took them off and we had a very nice lunch. It was kind of weird being there, in a restaurant with open windows and everything else, plenty of fresh air. But it was still kind of weird, but it's also really nice. And the food just seemed to taste better. I don't know. Maybe that's just having not done it for a year and a half. But in any case, hope you're getting out there. Hope you're getting your business trending in the right direction. Hope things are, in that regard, getting quote unquote back to normal for you. And hope you're having a good time and doing well. We want to renew our call for you. And I've been on Twitter earlier this week, especially letting people know to book yourself as a guest here on the PR Podcast. We have, and I've said this in the past, there's 52 weeks in a year. We have a new guest every show. That's 52 guests a year. You should be one of them. If you are in PR, if you are in news, if you have any kind of a hand or interest in how the news is made or how the news business functions, we want you to share your perspective. So get in touch. DM on any of the socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Send a message, reach out, let us know. You can connect with us through the PR Podcast, or you can even come directly to me at Jody Fisher, JodyFisher on Twitter. Send me a message, book yourself on the PR Podcast, just like our guest this week did. And I'm so glad she did. So let's get her introduced. Michelle Glogovac is the founder and CEO of the MSL Collective. She works with entrepreneurs, authors, and experts to niche down, grow their businesses and their visibility while ensuring their message reaches the masses. She is also the host of the My Simplified Life podcast. Got to check that one out as well. Michelle, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh, this is great. And I am here in the PR garage, and you are joining us from the PR closet, I guess it is, right?
Yes, the master bedroom closet.
That's great. It sounds terrific, by the way. So whatever you're doing with the acoustics in there, it's working.
It's my clothes. It's my shopping obsession of clothes. It absorbs the sound. My editor loves it.
Fantastic. Well, tell us about your business. And public relations is a little new for you, right? So tell us about your business and what you do and where you are.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of a newbie. Been in this for a couple years on the traditional PR side, more so on the podcast pitching side. Prior to that, for 18 years, I was in corporate aviation selling jet fuel to corporate flight departments and CEOs and rich people, saving them money in order to make them more money. I was laid off in April of 2018, and it was a blessing in disguise because I was never really that into aviation. I think that jets are sexy, but that's about as far as it went. You're selling jet fuel and nickel diming, and that's about it. And my husband's also in corporate aviation. So we had been traveling together, which was fun. But then we had two kids, and the nanny came with us. And it just, traveling hotels with two little ones is not the same. It's not glamorous. And I said, great, what can I do for myself? I want to stay at home with them, but have a business. I want to make an impact on the world, because to me, selling jet fuel was not making a positive impact in some way. And I started listening to podcasts, and a host reached out to me and said, "You're obviously liking what I'm putting out. Do you want to start pitching me?" And I went, "Sure," because PR pitching is relationships, and so is sales. So it wasn't something new to me, cold calling and crafting a reason as to why you should go with me and my client. It was no big shift, really, even though aviation and PR are very different. So I started podcast pitching, and then I just got more into podcasts in general, and I started producing her show, other shows, launched my own show, and then realized I really don't like producing shows, because a lot's last minute. It's, oh, it's Monday at 8 and the show goes live Tuesday at 5 a.m. and it just got to me. So I said, forget that. I really love the pitching part. And as I got better and better at that, my client said, well, where else can you pitch us? Because you're really good at this. So then I launched into traditional PR, and pitching to TV and digital outlets and everywhere else. And that's how it came to be the MSL Collective. MSL stands for My Simplified Life, which is where the podcast came from. And that's where I am today.
That is a great story. That's sort of the reverse of what I think a lot of people's path to PR is. But it's so terrific to hear the story about how you sort of transferred your skills there, and took the sales attitude that you had and transferred that into, instead of, like you said, selling jet fuel, selling PR pitches.
Yeah.
Who are some of your clients, or what areas do some of your clients occupy? What industries are you in?
My clients have all been female minorities, in the wellness space, parenting space, online business space, uh, advocacy, Black Lives Matter, adoption. Really, it's the whole gamut, but they've all been females, and that's just kind of how it's happened. My business has all been referral based up until now, and so, friends telling friends, and they all come on board. So that's really been my specialty, a lot of business to consumer relations.
That is wonderful, and it's so great to hear that the referrals are working well for you, and that you don't have to really spend too much time relying on the cold calling or the going out and researching companies and going after them and things like that. There's a lot of, because we do enough of that with the PR pitching, knocking on
Right.
doors and getting no for an answer. You don't need to do that to generate business too. So that's awesome, and I'm sure you've been listening to the subject matter there. You've been really busy throughout the entire pandemic and the sort of the last 18 months. You've probably been super busy.
Yeah, there's definitely never a lull in content and what to pitch. And it's been a lot of, I've got my strategy outlined for the next 6 months, and then, oh, something's gone on, or there's a Black Lives Matter, movement, and, even more so, well, now let's pitch this angle and do this. So yeah, it's been constant.
That's great. Um, Tell us a little bit about how you help your clients create those effective strategies. It's got to be, obviously the subject matter is different, right? Every client is different. They have a different message. They want to focus on a different thing. But are there some generalities that maybe you can share in terms of how you work with your clients, how you work through that creating a strategy process?
I really stalk them. And I put that up actually today on Instagram and Twitter, is that I stalk, and by stalk I mean research my clients, but I get to know them on an intimate level, as most of us do, to the point that sometimes I know them better than they know themselves. Where I have clients, especially in the podcast industry, when we come talked about pitching to podcasts, it can't be a generic, just I do parenting. It has to be more specific, and it's my job to really pull that out of them as to what specifically are you good at, and what can you be the expert to speak on this. And it's in looking at that and really tailoring those different subjects that I create my strategy and the content that goes around it. I think oftentimes I've seen in clients where they don't even realize what's been put on their website because they haven't refreshed it in so long. And I've pulled a topic where I said, I think you can speak on this. And the woman said, where would you think that? Why would you think that? Where would you get that from? I said, it's the first bullet point on your website. So you might want to change that if you don't want to be known for that. And it's really, what do you want to be known for? What are your goals? And let's really decipher how we can get to reach those goals.
That's amazing about the bullet point there, because I mean, that's also affecting their SEO.
Yeah,
And people who are searching, if they're searching that they happen to search that search term or that phrase, they're coming up. And if they don't want to be known for that, that's a problem. That's a huge problem.
exactly. And I think a lot of people also don't realize how much more depth there is to their story and their expertise. I worked with a big DIY gal who, has Home Depot as one of her partners, and she thought that all she could speak on was really DIY. And this was the beginning of the pandemic, and I went, "Well, no, you have this career story change that you've done. You can teach people how to work from home in a space that they love. There's so much more to it that I think we get stuck in our own heads. So it's nice to have an outside perspective say you're actually really good at all these other things, not just this one specific thing."
Yeah, that is the value I think that we as PR people and as consultants, having that outside perspective is what they hire us for,
Yeah.
because we have to look at them the way the rest of the world looks at them
Hmm.
and not drink the Kool-Aid too much. We have to be, a cheerleader to a degree, but a constructive criticism cheerleader, if you will. We have to
Exactly.
look at them and say, here's how the rest of the world is looking at you. And also, here's the things that you may not know you can do well, as you said.
You have to be outspoken. You can't just hold back as to, well, here's how you really look to the world. You have to just say what it is because that's the truth and that's what you're getting paid for.
And sometimes that hurts. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to be really diplomatic with how you approach that conversation. Yeah, I've had clients, and I'm sure everyone has had clients who sit down in front of them, or get them on the phone, and they're convinced they know what media outlet they need to be in.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think my experience is that it's and I'm not trying to be too hard when I say this, it was very ego driven, right?
Hmm.
I want to be in the New York Times. I want to be on CNN. I want to be, and it's always the big one, right? It's always the
Yeah.
big in lights. And I'm a fan of two approaches. One, fish where your fish are. In other words, talk to your audience. Your audience is not necessarily the New York Times or CNN. Sure, it's a huge audience, but you may get more traction. You may get more engagement, to borrow a social media term, being on and let's take your example, on a parenting blog, on a mommy blog, on,
Hmm.
something that is far smaller in scale, but has such a greater level of engagement that you will get far more satisfaction and far more results out of being in that particular place. Would you agree?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And this is big for me on the podcast side because people will come and say, I want to be on Jenna Kutcher's. I want to be on, Entrepreneurs on Fire. Well, first of all, they charge a lot to be on there now. So that's a no. I would advise against paying $10,000 to be on one show. You can spend your money a lot better.
We do
And,
not we do not have a price tag to be here on the PR podcast, by the way. If anybody would like to throw us some money, that's totally fine, but this is a free podcast. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's how it should be. And, I will go through with them, like, just because you want to be on this show because it's widely known doesn't mean that the person you want to talk to is actually listening. Where are those listeners? And I'd rather put someone on a show that has 5 reviews, but has the exact target audience that we want to hit because 100 listeners that are the right listeners are much better than 100,000 listeners that nobody really cares about what you're doing or selling or who you are.
And it's so easy, and I've found myself doing this. It's so easy to drift away from any podcast. And there was a point where I was listening to, and I'll use the example of the New York Times, The Daily, which is a great podcast, right? And I would say for any news junkie, it is required listening every day, right? But I've had a period where I drifted away from that podcast, even though I love to listen to it, even though it's probably some of the best journalism around. I just didn't have time for it, and I moved away from it. But I will gravitate to the ones that I know are really speaking to me, that I'm really engaged in, that I go, oh, I really want to hear that person. Is
Mhm.
that maybe an approach that you take with your clients too?
Yeah, and I in pitching 2 podcasts, I listen to all of the shows, at least 1 episode, to ensure that it's a good match and, that, I can relate myself to whoever I'm pitching to, whether it's me or my client, to say, "Yeah, we're actually human beings on this side, and I have listened to your episodes. Here's what I liked. Here's," feedback in a positive way. I never give bad feedback. Um, but, to really focus on that and find these podcasts that are a good match. And yes, I listen, I come and go, especially during the pandemic, we all saw a dip in listenership. And then we saw it jump back up as everyone got used to a new routine. And I'm sure as people go back into the office, we'll see another change in, downloads and whatnot. But I do the same thing. It really depends on my life and what's going on at the moment as to whether I'm listening or not listening. But, then I'll see friends on your show and I'm like, oh, got to listen to that episode. So I think it really depends, and that goes into, you know, making sure that you're marketing your show and your interviews so that people do see that you're out there and doing this and getting those listens.
So, what are a couple of suggestions that you can make to our audience if they want to pitch someone to a podcast? What are some of the things that maybe you do that you think have been impactful in being successful in getting someone booked on a podcast? Yeah, and when we're talking about maybe a podcast where you're pitching them for the first time, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's very different from a traditional media pitch in that you're giving more information to a podcast host. I will listen, I will relate to them just as we do to journalists, but then a short bio of the individual you're pitching. I give their expert topics. I do attach the one sheet to it that has all of their topics, but I'll throw in a few that actually match the show the best. And then I also include the links to their website, social media, where they've also been featured, different interviews. So they know that, yeah, they can talk. Um, they know what they're doing. And then the other big thing is in the follow up because podcasters, we all have other jobs. This is not your and my full-time job. Unlike journalists where we're following up, within 2 days and, it's the news and it's timeliness. Podcasts are much different. So I go 3 weeks before I follow up, and I'll follow up a couple times, every 3 weeks and just saying, hey, just checking in, because oftentimes the yeses are actually coming on the second follow up, uh, because people are busy. They're not looking for guests all the time. It's not something that needs to be rushed for them. And the number one thing that I see is to not give the host homework. I get pitched quite often. And if you don't have a link in there, I don't have time to Google who you are. That's just the way it is. And I think that's like PR 101 for those of us who are listening and we know how to do that. But there are agencies out there who will pitch and they don't relate to you. I had one actually pitch to me and say, "I've seen your recent guests. My podcast is not visual. So you have not seen anybody, and don't just pull from the last episode, go back a few episodes and actually really look into, research it, listen to it, and relate to it." I think it's kind of just laziness to go, "Oh, I saw that last week you had, so and so on, and that was great." That tells me nothing. You can get that off of researching Apple Podcasts. So show that you actually genuinely want to pitch your client there, mean it, and be sure not to give them homework.
No, great pieces of advice there, and you're totally right. That I think that applies across all media pitching, right? You've got to
Mhm.
do your homework on the not only the outlet that you're going after, but the individual reporter or editor or whoever that person is that you're emailing or sending a pitch to. Um, because they all have, going back to your point of follow-ups and things like that, they all run on different schedules. The TV and radio broadcast newsroom, they're worried about today. They
Mhm.
might be a little bit worried about tomorrow, and depending on their job, if they're a booker or something, they're worried about next week, but that's it, right? Newspaper obviously has a very different type of a timeline. They're both worried about tomorrow's paper, but about this weekend's paper and about next weekend's paper and about what's going to happen next Wednesday and things like that. And then you've got people with longer horizons, whether you're getting into weeklies, you're getting into monthlies, or you're getting into what you talked about with podcasts, where you could be booking a guest a month or two out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it might not even go live for another month or two after that, you know? It's all about patience. It really is.
Patience and perseverance. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. For sure. Um, we were talking a little bit offline about how to repurpose podcast content, right? And
Yeah.
sort of what you do. The content lives beyond the initial hit, right? Whether that's
Yes.
newspaper article, the radio interview, the podcast episode. What do you do with your clients to repurpose that podcast content or any of that content for that matter?
Yeah, and it goes the same as you said for any outlet that you are landing a feature, an interview in. First of all, share it. First and foremost, please share it, and not just in your Instagram stories for 24 hours. I think that's really nonsense. It's a cop out, and you really need to show that you are grateful that you've just been featured in this
Oh,
interview
thank
outlet.
you. It's
Yeah.
the thank you, right?
Yes, it's the thank you. I compare it to a dinner party. You bring the host a guest, you bring the host a gift, and that's your expertise. And then when the dinner party's over, you're going to send them a text or a thank you card or something. And it's got to be beyond this 24 hours of, hey, did you see me? I hate the cop out of, well, their social media assets didn't fit my aesthetic. BS. If you don't like the way the graphic looks that they sent you, make it a carousel so that you have a graphic that you like, and behind it is going to be their graphic. And it's also going to help your social media engagement because now you've had someone swiping. So share it first and foremost. You've got your stories, you've got your Instagram feed. Then look through the transcript, listen to the episode, pull a transcript, and find quotes of yourself and use them on Twitter, on LinkedIn, again in your Instagram, and refer back to that episode. It's so easy, and yet so many people don't do it. And I think we also often forget that just because we feel like we're repeating ourselves, the listeners, the viewers, the readers are not. They forget it or they didn't see it because of algorithms. So repeat yourself. Yes, I was on this show. Here's what I said, or here was my deep thought. Go check this episode out because I did this interview. And really, I do that whether it's on the podcast side and it's my own show, or it's on the client side or my side, to really pull that out and then put it up there. Show notes, create evergreen content, put it on a website. You should have your own media press page on your website that links back to all of these. So it's some of it can sound like it's work, but if you have a process in place and you know that this is what we got to do for every time, every interview, every show, then it becomes really easy.
Yeah, I love what you said there about sharing it again and again and again.
Mhm.
And the example that I'll use that I've seen myself is the USA Today Twitter feed. You will see a single story, the same story, almost the same tweet, go by 4 or 5 times in the course of a day.
Mhm.
They're tweeting probably every 10 to 15 minutes. And it's the same 10 or 12 stories in the course of a 24-hour period. They're just hitting it again and again and again. And that's because Twitter as a platform is a volume game.
Mhm.
And it's constantly coming across. I liken it to the old AP Newswire that I used to pull in the newsroom, right? You've got that dot matrix printer that's just sitting in the corner of the room, and you're pulling it and you're handing it to the editor and that kind of stuff. But it's the same thing. It's just this volume game. And so I love that suggestion that you share it not just once, but a couple times. And it doesn't even, to your point, have to be the precisely same piece of content. It'd be slightly modified, look a little different, sound a little different. I love the pull quote
Yeah.
concept. That's gold, right? Because not only can you do that in the form of a graphic where you can actually sort of screenshot the words and make it into a graphic, but you can also put that in the text,
Mhm.
and sort of double up there and make it really, really smart. That's great. Oh, so everybody should take the last 4 minutes of this podcast, rewind it, and then just write down everything that Michelle just said, because that's just absolute gold. Absolute gold. Do you have? We didn't talk about this offline, but I'll ask you this. have you ever had a situation with a podcast booker where you initially pitched and they said, no, thanks, and then they came back around? Or did you ever have a situation where you were able to turn something around by persevering, as you said?
Both. I've had it where they've said, "Oh, we're booked and this and that." Oftentimes it'll be, "Hey, can you follow up with us in a couple months? Can you follow up, down the road?" And I put a note. I use Trello. Trello's my best friend. Or sometimes like today, I just had one come back and say, "I'm booked until September. Can you follow up then?" And I actually hit reply. I did the email draft and then I scheduled it for September 1st. So yeah, you can do it. So I don't have to think about it. It's
That's the
done.
sales DNA in you, right?
Yeah, I will get it. It's done. I don't have to think about it. But yeah, there's been times where I had one just last week. She came back and she said, nutrition and wellness just don't do really great on the show. Is there anything else that your client can speak on? And I gave her some other options and twisted it a bit and gave her backstory. And she went, "Oh, well, that sounds good. Okay, yeah, let's do it." So, if they're open to those conversations, then you definitely need to have them. No doesn't always mean no. That's how I
I
see it.
I find that what you just described there with someone engaging with you over an email or over a phone and saying, "Well, we don't do this, but do you have anything else?" Boy, if you don't come back
Hmm.
to that question, you are leaving it. You are just leaving it on the table and walking away. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many that I've seen people go, "Oh, well, no." It's the same as like the doing the interview and the interviewer getting to the end and saying, "Is there anything else you want to add?" And the client goes, "No, I think we covered it."
Yeah.
Like unless you're being grilled, you haven't covered it. Say the thing you wanted to say again,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Go
Exactly.
back. Totally, totally. Oh, well, this has been, like I said, this has been some real gold here, Michelle. Thank you for sharing these insights.
Oh,
Uh,
my pleasure.
really, really appreciate it. We are going to segue into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast here, and I know you're looking forward to it.
Yeah, this part
This
makes me
is
more nervous than the interview.
well, this is right. Well, everybody knows who's listened. This is where we steal a page from inside the actor's studio. We ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions meant to elicit just some simple answers. Michelle, you told me before the podcast that you prepared. So with your indulgence, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
I love the Skim. I start every single day reading the Skim. That is absolutely. And then my guilty pleasure news source is TMZ because they are on it.
I just saw today, total sidebar. Um, Pulitzer Prize announcements just came out. BuzzFeed won a Pulitzer Prize.
Wow.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Just amazing for a very serious story that they covered. But I mean, we are in a new world when BuzzFeed is
Yeah.
and I'm not denigrating BuzzFeed, right? Like this is the new world that us PR people are living in now.
Yeah.
BuzzFeed has got itself a Pulitzer. Rapid fire question number 2. What is your favorite social media platform?
I really love Twitter. I think it's genuine relationship based. I've made amazing friendships. Yeah, I love Twitter. Instagram's okay, but Twitter is my absolute favorite.
Yeah, Instagram is the guilty pleasure, the picture.
Yeah,
Twitter's where you go for the info. I agree. Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
both.
Excellent. At the same time?
Sometimes, yeah, I'm near San Francisco, home of the Irish coffee. So absolutely sometimes both.
There you go. There you go. Rapid fire question number 4, what is your favorite on the run food?
I don't eat on the run. So my favorite food is sushi.
Ooh, love it. Love it. Rapid fire question number 5, what do you want to be after you finish this career?
Retired on the beach and still making an impact in the world.
Excellent. Wow, it's almost like you prepared.
Almost. Just kind of, sort of.
That is great. I will meet you on the beach for sure.
Perfect.
That's where you'll find me. Well, Michelle, this has been a great conversation. Please let people know how they can find you online.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find my website is the mslcollective.com. You can check out my podcast, My Simplified Life, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Michelle Glogovac and on Twitter at Mick Glogovac. And then, of course, Facebook is the MSL Collective.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for spending time with us today. We
Thank
really appreciate
you.
you sharing your insights. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. And book yourself as a guest. Please do reach out. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out and hire him there for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and online at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.